An ant breaks from the foraging line. She staggers past her nestmates without stopping, without the ritual tap of antennae. The pheromone trail that should pull her home means nothing now. She walks into the undergrowth with a gait that is wrong, uneven, jerky, deliberate in a way that has nothing to do with her. Around her, the colony hums with purpose. Workers haul leaf fragments. Scouts lay chemical signposts. Soldiers patrol. She registers none of it. She climbs a fern stem, stops, turns, climbs higher, then higher still. This is not confusion. This is not a sick ant wandering off to die. A fungus is growing through her body cavity, threading itself between her muscle fibers, steering her toward a destination she has never seen. She is no longer the driver. She is the vehicle. And the thing piloting her has no brain. Days earlier, a single spore landed on her leg, nearly invisible, no bigger than a fleck of dust. It clung there, patient, waiting for the right humidity. Then it germinated. A thread-like hypha pushed through her cuticle, drilling past the waxy armor that had kept her safe her whole life. Once inside, it began to feed. The fungus didn't rush, it spread slowly, branching through her body cavity, soaking up nutrients from her hemolymph. More hyphae, then more. A quiet invasion unfolding beneath her exoskeleton. The ant grew sluggish. She stopped grooming, stopped eating. Her nestmates noticed something wrong. The way she moved, the tremor in her antennae, and they nudged her toward the colony's edge. They knew. And then came the twitching. A leg jerked without permission. A muscle contracted when no signal from her brain had called for it. Fungal cells were already pressing against her muscle fibers, releasing compounds that hijacked the contraction machinery. Her mind was still hers, but her body was beginning to answer to something else. Something that wanted her to climb. And the direction was always the same, up, away from the colony, toward thinner air and brighter light. The fungus was steering her toward a precise height, a precise humidity, a precise angle of leaf, conditions it needed but could not reach on its own. The ant was being driven toward a destination she had never seen, by a passenger that had never seen anything at all. The ant stops at a specific height on the underside of a leaf, gripping a vein. She bites down. Not a test, not a nibble, a full, irreversible lock. Her mandibles clamp with a force that will never release. Even as her leg muscles wither, even as her brain dissolves into fungal paste, her jaw stays shut. The ant is no longer an ant. She is an anchor. Inside her, the fungus has consumed nearly everything. Her organs are gone, replaced by a dense web of fungal cells woven through her muscle fibers like a second nervous system. Her brain, what remains of it, is being digested. But the bite happened without any signal from that brain. The mandibles locked because the muscles themselves were told to contract directly by cells that have no brain of their own. Around her, the microclimate is perfect. Cool air pools just above the soil. Humidity stays high. The leaf blocks direct sun. The fungus found exactly the spot it needs to fruit. But how? The ant's brain was offline. There is no pilot in the cockpit. And the fungus, this brainless passenger, has never seen a leaf, never felt humidity, never known height. So where did the instructions come from? The puzzle sat in plain sight for over 100 years. 101 1 eyes 11859. Alfred Russel Wallace, co-discoverer of natural selection, is collecting insects in the forests of Sulawesi when he keeps finding the same strange thing. Ants, dead ants, jaws locked onto the underside of leaves, frozen mid-bite, like they turned to stone. He gathers them, labels them, ships them back to England, and has absolutely no explanation. For more than a century, Those clamped corpses sit in museum drawers, a cryptozoological curiosity, a footnote nobody can solve. Then, in the early 2000s, a researcher named David Hughes starts cutting them open, and what he sees overturns the obvious assumption. The fungus did not eat the brain. It did not rewire any neurons. The ant's brain is still there, intact, alive, and completely irrelevant. The fungus bypassed the central nervous system entirely. Instead, it threaded itself through the muscles, a mesh of living filaments wrapped around every fiber. The puppet master never touched the mind. It seized the body directly, which means the whole premise was wrong. This isn't mind control, it's muscle control. And that raises a question far stranger than the original. If there's no brain giving orders, if the fungus itself has no nerves, no processing center, no pilot, then what is coordinating the ant's final, precise act? So the fungus ignores the brain, leaves it sitting there, alive, useless. Instead, in the days before the final climb, fungal cells multiply into a three-dimensional mesh that wraps every muscle bundle in the ant's body. Individual hyphae slip between individual muscle fibers. Then, at thousands of points across the legs, the thorax, the jaws, they release chemicals that force those fibers to contract. Not randomly, in sequences. One muscle pulls, then another, coordinated movement that looks exactly like an ant walking and climbing under its own will. But the ant isn't deciding anything. Its body is a marionette, and every tug on the strings comes from a leaderless network. No brain in the mesh, no command center, no single hypha giving orders. Each cell responds only to what its immediate neighbors are doing, a cascade of local signals that somehow adds up to a coherent whole. A blind network, thousands of nodes, no pilot, and yet it walks the ant to exactly the right height. Which means the network still needs to know when to stop the climb and trigger the bite. How does a brainless fungus sense the outside world? The hyphae don't stay inside. They push through the seams between the plates of her abdomen, at the joints, at the neck, anywhere the exoskeleton leaves a gap. The moment each filament touches open air, it becomes a sensor, humidity, temperature, the faint chemical signature of the leaf beneath her feet. Millions of fungal tips spread across her body, each one tasting the atmosphere, and together they form a single distributed instrument. No brain required, just a living weather station wrapped around a dying ant. The network waits. When the readings align, humidity in the narrow band where spores can travel, temperature right, leaf chemistry confirming the correct host plant, the signal fires. A cascade rushes through the hyphae and slams into her jaw muscles. Her mandibles bite down on the vein. The grip locks with a force she cannot override, cannot release, cannot even feel anymore. She is fixed. A clamp of flesh and chitin, positioned at the precise height and angle the fungus needs. And now, with the ant anchored and the conditions confirmed, the fungus begins what it actually came here to do. The ant is hollow. The fungus has eaten everything soft inside her, muscles, nerves, organs, and replaced the empty space with a scaffold of itself. What's left is a husk, clamped to the leaf vein. And from the back of that husk, something is rising. A stalk pushes through the seam where her head meets her thorax. Pale and glistening at first, then it hardens, darkens, reaching up into the air. At its tip, a bulb swells round, heavy, packed tight with thousands of spores. Each one a single cell, wrapped in a shell tough enough to survive the open world. The ant's locked jaws hold her steady, while the stalk finds its height. Exactly where the breeze moves slow and the humidity sits in a narrow band the fungus can taste. Then the capsule splits. Spores pour out in a fine drifting cloud, catching the faintest currents, spreading downward through the still air. They settle on leaves, on bark, on the forest floor. One lands on the leg of a carpenter ant passing below. She keeps walking. The spore is already softening its outer coat, already secreting the enzymes that will eat a hole through her cuticle. She carries it with her, unaware, into the colony. The fungus has no brain, no plan, no map of what comes next. It doesn't need one. The cycle knows. Her brain was never invaded. The fungus didn't need it. By the time she climbed, her muscles weren't hers anymore. A mesh of hyphae had woven through every fiber, squeezing and releasing, steering her legs with chemical pulses. She climbed because the network told her legs to climb. She bit because the network flooded her jaw with one final, irreversible signal. And the leaf she chose was no accident. The fungal cells inside her read gradients of humidity, of volatile compounds drifting through the understory air. They guided her to that exact vein, at a specific height above the forest floor, where the microclimate was just right, the perfect launch pad. There is no commander here. No brain, no plan, no mind. Just a trillion tiny nodes, each following a local rule, and together they compute a precise environmental target. Distributed intelligence woven from fungus and flesh, below another carpenter ant walks the same trail. She passes beneath the leaf where her dead compatriot still grips the vein, a stalk already pushing through the back of its head. On her leg, a microscopic spore clings, already germinating. The quiet, terrible math continues.